All right. What is up, YouTube? What is going on, fellow fantasy people? And of course, what is up, the Catch fam? All right, so it is time for some waiver wire mania, waiver wire Monday, as always, man. Waited a little bit longer in the day for this. Didn't want to. I don't know if it was a good time to keep doing it in the morning when I know a lot of people can't really hop on and see. But nonetheless, man, let's hop right into it. Not as many players to go over in this current week, but we do have some names that we want to get right into. Okay, so Chuba Hubbard, I should say, is definitely the top priority here heading into week 4. Okay, obviously the injury to Christian McCaffrey is a huge, huge deal, and Hubbard's going to be getting, the bulk amount of carries for the Carolina Panthers, and that volume alone makes him the most valuable waiver wire, ad at the moment. But let's see. I did get a fantasy question come through here. I'm at work and can't watch. Just wanted to say your Chamar Chase advice won me my matchup from Carter Payne. Shout out to you, Carter Payne. Good job on the dub, baby. Happy to see a member of the Catch fam get a dub. So we appreciate you, my guy, and we appreciate you letting us know that some of our advice helped you out over the weekend. Super stoked to see that, man. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and no worries if you can't hop on right now, but we appreciate you letting us know. But yeah, Chuba Hubbard, man, it's going to be everyone's top running back waiver this week. So I think this is pretty straightforward. We went over this after Thursday night's game, right? We talked about this after the injury to Christian McCaffrey as well. So yeah, get Hubbard on your waiver wire additions. He is the top priority at the moment. Okay, let's talk about Peyton Barber of the Las Vegas Raiders, man. I do know, we had another subscriber out there who won his matchup in a deeper league by starting Peyton Barber. And listen, man, we're not going to see this on a consistent basis from Barber. I truly don't believe. He's got the Chargers coming up, so it's a relatively tough matchup there. And then he's got Chicago, Denver, and Philly. So those are all very bad matchups, man. But nonetheless, in deeper leagues, this is a player that you should consider making the addition with, right? This is someone who we want to at least consider in deeper leagues as long as Josh Jacobs is sidelined and not playing, right? He is taking the down the field work from Kenyon Drake, right? He is taking most of the goal line work, and he's getting some work in the receiving game as well. As we see, 111 rushing yards, against Miami, the touchdown and 31 receiving yards. So it's a great stat line, but I just don't know on a consistent basis how much we're going to see this. But with that being said, as long as Josh Jacobs is injured, he's worth a stash and he's worth monitoring. But I would advise primarily in deeper leagues, unless you're really hurting at the running back position, only then would we consider Peyton Barber. But he looked very good against Miami, and we don't want to discredit that. And I do think some of these upcoming matchups are going to be very difficult and not really give him the best game script overall, man. But I would advise, just add Peyton Barber with caution. This is all I'm saying. Okay, so we know that Deontay Johnson has been sidelined, right? And Juju Smith-Schuster left the game against the Bengals yesterday with a rib injury. So with that being said, Chase Claypool is the number 1 receiver, followed by that of James Washington. So not a great stat line, just 20 receiving yards for that of James Washington, and that Week 3 loss to Cincinnati. But at the moment, this is your number 2 receiver on the Pittsburgh Steelers. So in full PPR and deeper leagues, right, this is someone that we need to consider facing Green Bay, Denver, and Seattle. So decent matchups, not a very good matchup against Denver. Green Bay and Seattle kind of middle of the pack against receivers, right? So, but nonetheless, in full PPR and in deeper leagues, as long as James Washington is the number 2 receiver and as long as Juju and Deontay Johnson are out, he's worth a shot and someone worth adding at least for this upcoming matchup against Green Bay in deeper leagues and in full PPR leagues. Okay. Colin Johnson, yeah, another guy who's stepping up due to injuries, right? Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton both coming down with those hamstring injuries against the Falcons, right? So this is the next man up, right? So in deeper leagues and in full PPR leagues, our guy Colin Johnson is worth a snag, right? If you're desperate at receiver for the time being, as long as Slayton and Shepard aren't playing, right? I mean, 7 targets, 5 receptions, and 51 receiving yards. Pretty solid stat line in full PPR. He's got the Saints coming up, followed by Dallas, LA, and I believe that would be the LA Rams, right? Carolina and Kansas City, and then Las Vegas. So some pretty decent matchups overall, and some tough ones too. So I would say in deep leagues, and in full PPR leagues only are we thinking about Colin Johnson. But this situation with Slayton and Shepard being injured is worth monitoring, and this is your next man up, is that of Colin Johnson. All right, another receiver stepping up due to injury, right? We know that A.J. Brown exited the game yesterday versus Indianapolis Colts with a hamstring injury. A lot of hamstring injuries over the weekend, right, to pretty important receivers in fantasy. So our guy Nick Westbrook is the next man up for the Titans, and he responded pretty well overall, right? Caught all 4 of his targets for 53 yards and a touchdown. He did lose a fumble as well, which is not encouraging by any means, but it does happen, right? So this, as long as A.J. Brown is injured, right, I think that Nick Westbrook is worth a shot, but I would still advise for the most part in deeper leagues and full PPR leagues, but when we're looking at this schedule, right, he's got the New York Jets, in week 4, and then the Jacksonville Jaguars in week 5. Not as good of a matchup against Buffalo in week 6, but still some, a couple other decent matchups. But we're really eyeing week 4 and week 5 as we don't really anticipate this injury to A.J. Brown lasting too long. So I would say even in, smaller leagues, 10-man leagues, 12-man leagues, right? He's worth a shot right now just based on matchup alone, right? He's got to have a chance to score again against the Jets and against the Jaguars as well. And I'm just getting an update to my phone from the NFL app. Patriots' James White suffered hip subluxation, out indefinitely. Wow. So that might affect our waiver wire episode. We might hop back into that in a minute here as well. But yeah, James White out indefinitely. So wild, man. A lot of injuries over the weekend, man. So yeah, speaking of injuries, right, Nick Westbrook, I think is a good addition. But I don't know how long-term this is really going to impact your fantasy roster positively. But in week 4 and week 5, he might be worth a start. So that's a player who I think, even in smaller leagues, but definitely deeper leagues and full PPR leagues, Nick Westbrook is worth the addition. All right, so let's look at a couple quarterbacks, right, who may be available for you. Listen, Taylor Heineke has put up at least 20 fantasy points in his last 2 starts, right? Showed some poise against Buffalo, right? The Washington football team was down pretty early in this game, and he hung in there, man. They still got their asses beat, don't get me wrong, but he hung in there, man. And I think in deeper leagues and in superflex leagues, if he's available, I think he's worth an addition at this point. I think he's proved that, right? He's got Atlanta next week, who apparently is a little bit better defensively than we were anticipating, right? They actually played pretty well overall against our guy, Danny Dimes. Excuse me. I lost my train of thought for a second there. But yeah, I like where Taylor Heineke is at the moment, man. So I think he's worth an addition at this time, or this point in time. Sam Darnold is another player who's got at least 18 fantasy points through all his games, through these first 3 weeks, right? He's going up against Dallas in week 4, a good matchup. Philly and Minnesota a little bit better defensively, but they're still not great in the secondary. So he's got some good matchups, man. I know that the Panthers are dealing with a lot of injuries, man, but as long as DJ Moore is out on the field, and I think Sam Darnold's worth a shot. If Derek Carr, for some reason, is still available in your fantasy league, then he has absolutely proven to this point that he is worth a roster addition. So he's not available in my 12-man league, but if he's out there, yeah, he's proven at this point in time that he is worth a fantasy addition. Okay, so Jacoby Brissett played fairly well, for an injured Tua Tagovailoa, right? And he's got a couple tough matchups here, but on the latter end of things, right? He's going to face Jacksonville in Week 6 and Atlanta in Week 7. So if we see this rib injury to Tua lasting for quite some time, I mean, I know that Jacoby didn't throw a single touchdown, but I mean, the rushing touchdown kind of saved his stat line, right? But I think Indianapolis and Tampa Bay, they haven't been the best in the secondary through the season. So he might be worth an addition in Superflex leagues and in deeper leagues. But outside of that, we want to monitor this situation and then maybe think about if you need to stream a QB in Week 6 or Week 7. As long as Tua is out, he might be worth thinking about adding. We'll leave it there, right? Joe Burrow still not playing great from a fantasy perspective, right? We're kind of hoping that he can step it up. Carson Wentz is available in a lot of leagues right now, but we only saw, not even 8 fantasy points out of Carson Wentz in Week 3. So it's unfortunate, and we know that he's banged up, man, but I just don't think he's worth the addition unless you're playing in a very deep Superflex league. Jimmy G still not doing much of anything, right? The Trey Lance drum is being beaten louder and louder. Our guy Jameis, man, ever since that Week 1 crazy game, he's just kind of looked like same old Jameis, right? At least he bounced back and didn't throw any interceptions this week, but still really not a great stat line versus New England, although, they did get the dub. He did play well enough to get them the win, but other than that, man, not a lot to see there, right? Matt Ryan's probably available in your league. I still don't think he's worth adding at this point in time. Mac Jones, a really, really bad Sunday for Mac Jones, right? Not his worst performance yet from a fantasy standpoint, technically speaking, but from a football perspective, I do think this was his worst performance yet. With the 3 interceptions. I would say one of those interceptions was not his fault, the tipped ball off of Johnny Smith's hands, right? But outside of that, not a great performance out of our guy Mac and Cheese. So we're not jumping the gun there yet. Trevor Lawrence, man. Listen, I started Trevor Lawrence in my 20-man league, and he basically lost me my game. I lost by less than 10 points. If he had just put up a mediocre stat line, I probably would have won my game, right? I also had, when I traded for Trevor Lawrence, I could have traded for Taylor Heineke, and had I done so, I would have won my fantasy matchup. So that was great. But outside of that, man, Davis Mills played pretty well against Carolina. If you're in a very deep league, like a 20-man league, 20-man Superflex league, which I don't actually think is possible, but if you're in an extremely deep league, maybe you consider starting him. But these next 2 weeks, Buffalo and New England are going to be really, really tough for the young gunslinger Davis Mills. But I hope that he plays well. So yeah, essentially at the quarterback position, Taylor Heineke, Sam Darnold, really the 2 guys he might be available. And then, of course, like I said, Derek Carr in 8-man and 10-man leagues might be available. If Derek Carr is available, regardless of if you're an 8-man league or you're in a 16-man league, I think he's worth the addition. I think he's proven at this point that he needs to be on a fantasy roster, right? He looks absolutely phenomenal. This Raiders team looks like they can do it against any squad right now. They don't care what's thrown at them. So at least 21 points in all of his first 3 games, right? He's had a full quarter of overtime in both Week 1 and in Week 3 now. So technically speaking, that is to some degree bolstering his stats, but I'm not going to knock him for it, man. He's played very well in those extra quarters as well. So Derek Carr is available. Get him on your freaking roster right away. Let's jump to some tight ends, man. Tyler Conklin looks to be the tight end 1 at the moment for the Minnesota Vikings. I don't want to jump the gun on this one, but I also think that this looks pretty legit, right? weeks 1 and week 2, not the best overall output, right? But he really showed up here in week 3 against Seattle. 70 receiving yards, touchdown, 7 receptions off 8 targets, right? He's got Cleveland, Detroit, and Carolina. So Detroit's a good matchup. Cleveland, Carolina, a little bit more difficult. But overall, I do think that if you're struggling at the tight end position, he's worth the addition at this point in time. So I like where Tyler Conklin's looking, right? Jaron Johnson is someone who still being considered as coming into week 3, people were considering starting, still looking at week 1. And I told you guys to be really hesitant with this player and that of Jaron Johnson, as, we really haven't seen any consistency, and that was certainly proved in week 3 with 0 targets and a true goose egg. But our guy, Pat F, man, talked about him all off season. Finally saw him get a score, right? Was super, super happy. I mean, I literally just looked right up the TV screen. And I was like, wow. I was mesmerized because I truly didn't know when we were going to see this happen. And I think in our Saturday night late stream, we actually had someone come through really struggling at tight end and asked, should I start Pat F? And I was pretty hesitant because we have such a small sample size from him, and we still have a very small sample size for our guy, Pat F, right? But I was super stoked to see him score. Do we jump the gun and go ahead and add him in case he begins to break out? I still think it's quite early to make that decision, right? We want to see him score at least one more time in the next coming weeks. Some relatively tough matchups, Green Bay and Seattle kind of middle of the pack, and then Denver looks to be elite defensively at this point in time, man. So I would still hold off unless you're in like a 16-plus team league. Then I would consider adding Pat F. I thought about it in my 20-man league as I'm not getting a lot of consistency out of Jared Cook, but I also don't have a lot of room on my roster at the moment. But nonetheless, man, super stoked. I mean, this is one of the guys who I think I ranked him as my 24th tight end going into the season, right? And I like where he's at, man, but I would still like to see a larger sample size out of our guy, Pat F, before we jump the gun on him. LeBron's Brain, what is going on, man? Happy to see you in the stream. Happy to see you in the live chat as always, my guy. Hawkinson decided to not play 100% on me this week. Yeah, that, the overall game script for the Ravens and the Lions was just a really strange game overall, man. It was a weird game for all fantasy players involved, right? And yeah, I mean, the way he's been playing, it was kind of hard not to look at him like a must start, right? I mean, we see 27 point, and these are half PPR numbers. So if you're playing full PPR, he's had over 20 points in his first 2 weeks, right? I think over 22 points, if I'm not mistaken, or at least 20 points nonetheless, right? But yeah, just 10 receiving yards against Baltimore in week 3. This was an awful game. This game made me very, very angry from a fantasy perspective. Tyson Williams did nothing, right? Marquise Brown dropped 2 touchdowns. It was abysmal, man. The receivers were not helping out Lamar Jackson, and that's just on the Ravens side of things, right? Hawkinson and our guy Cephas, who I had really started to believe was the number 1 receiver for the Lions, they really let us down, man. Tough game. If you are an owner of any Ravens players and any Lions primary players as well, so yeah. Tough game, and sorry to hear that it affected your roster, my guy. I think it definitely affected a lot of our rosters. I was very disappointed in that game overall. LeBron's Brain, I mean, if Dak gets more points than Rieger tonight, I still win, but I think you got a good shot then. I think you truly do have a good shot to win if that's the outlook you're looking on. But I think Dak's going to have a good night, man. So, looking at the tight ends available, I really just am looking at Conklin as really the top ad of the week. Dan Arnold of the Carolina Panthers has now been traded to the Jacksonville Jaguars. That could potentially have some impact, as we know that James O'Shaughnessy has been placed on IR, right? But I don't know how much I want to trust the Jacksonville Jaguars offense, right? Max Williams was someone that I talked about right? You guys remember me saying, should I consider starting Max Williams? But this was another frustrating game script with the Arizona Cardinals and the Jacksonville Jaguars. That game did not turn out how we anticipated it to. I mean, the Arizona Cardinals still whipped the Jacksonville Jaguars' ass, but it was just kind of in strange fashion, right? So once again, when we see these big weeks randomly out of tight ends we've never heard of, it's very dangerous to jump the gun on them, and we made the right decision by not going out and adding Max Williams, and being that he's facing the Rams and the Niners in Cleveland, I would stay away from Max Williams for the time being. Real Goated, hey Catch, hey, what is going on, brother? Happy to see you as always, man. Love having you up in the chat. Loyal member of the Catch fam. Hope you're doing fantastic, man. Gerald Everett had a pretty good game against Minnesota, but once again, it's just very difficult with a lot of these, kind of bottom tier tight ends, right? Good stat line, full PPR in week 1, awful stat line week 2, and a decent stat line in full PPR in week 3. But now he's got the Niners and the LA Rams and then Pittsburgh and New Orleans, right? Not very good matchups overall. So I'm staying away from Gerald Everett. So really, when we're looking at the tight end position, bad game out of David Njoku. There's no one I'm really thinking about. The Bears, right? We were kind of hoping Cole Kmet could have some breakout games, and the Bears look scary bad. So really, we could consider Dalton Schultz, right? We could consider our guy Blake Jarwin. But we still, the way these Dallas tight ends are being implemented, we need a larger sample size, long story short. So Tyler Conklin, your top tight end. If you need to go out and add someone, I think he's the best option, although we did just go over, right? When we have these tight ends break out and have these big games, we still want to see a larger sample size before we jump the gun. Kind of like some of the guys we just went over, right? But nonetheless, I feel like he actually has the best shot out of all these guys to be an actual legitimate tight end, right? Jaron Johnson, Pat F., Gerald Everett, Max Williams. Want to see a larger sample size, and we want to monitor the situation with Dan Arnold being shipped over to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So let's take a look at some defenses. If the Saints are available, I think at this point in time, if you're struggling defensively, they're a pretty decent option going up against the Giants and the Washington football team in the next coming weeks. So I like where they're at the moment. They played very well, although they were relatively banged up. Defensively, they came out and they played pretty well. And I'm just trying to check. I mean, there's still a couple other teams that are performing pretty well. I mean, the Browns might be available. They've got Minnesota. It's not as good of a matchup next week, right? The Bengals are actually playing pretty well defensively, and they've got Jacksonville. That's a pretty good weekly stream, right? Outside of that, though, and this is just who's available in my league. I mean, the Packers are playing pretty good defense and are available in a lot of leagues. The Colts available in a lot of leagues. And they've got Miami, but I'm putting a little bit more faith, in Jacoby Brisket than most people are. And actually, the New York Giants look okay defensively. So, I mean, they're going up against the Saints, so you could expect them to make some plays against our guy Jameis Winston, right? So there might be some options. I mean, Miami is available in my league. They might be available in yours. They've got a battered up Carson Wentz, right? The Niners are currently available in my league, but they've got a tough stretch. Seattle and Arizona in the coming weeks. So they've got a tough stretch, and that's probably why they've been dropped, right? Also, I mean, a good drop being that they put up 0 points against Green Bay in last night's nail-biter of a game. So, yeah, man, defensively there might be some options, but we'll probably dive into that a little bit later in the week as well. Let's see. Real Goated. I told Will Fuller is going to be good. He had a decent amount of targets. When Tua comes, he's going to be dangerous. Yeah, it was a good sample size. That's a good player to kind of shift to because he is available in a lot of leagues still. And I liked the sample size that we saw out of him in the matchup, right? they're definitely trying to implement him overall, and only 3 receptions, only 20 receiving yards, right? We saw him get a little banged up at the end of the game, right? But it's obvious that they're trying to utilize him, and I think regardless of the quarterback who is throwing him the ball, he's getting a fair amount of targets overall, right? But he did get, it says that he's practicing. Well, let's see. I don't think this is due to this possible injury. I mean, that in overtime, if I'm not mistaken, or that game was so crazy. It may have been the fourth quarter when Jacoby unleashed a giant bomb to him, and he got kind of tripped up in the end zone, right? That's the play I'm referring to in which that he may have gotten injured. But yeah, I think if he's available, he's a good stash right now. He's got Indy, Tampa Bay, Jacksonville, Atlanta, so some pretty good matchups coming in the coming weeks. So yeah, I like where Will Fuller is at, regardless of the quarterback playing. LeBron's brain. Also, I have both Taylor and Hines, and I'm just at a loss of words. Yeah. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, through the first 3 weeks of this NFL season, Nyheim Hines has had more PPR points than Jonathan Taylor. And, we were kind of beating the Nyheim Hines drum pretty hard in PPR scoring formats. In the offseason and in the preseason, that was a guy who, I took him like every freaking draft mock draft I did. And of course, I didn't take him in my real draft, so now I'm paying for it. So yeah, I know a lot of people are frustrated with that sentiment, but Nyheim Hines looks great, man. Real good. I'm surprised that James Robinson had 22 fantasy points. I might start him next week. I was surprised too. It's good to see. I've got him in both my leagues, and I benched him in my 12-man league. I started him in my 20-man league. I didn't really have a choice, right? And he had a good game, and he was utilized pretty heavily. So what we'll do here, we'll kind of just go through the entire list. This is a 12-man league, so it should give you guys pretty good idea of who could be available. We'll see if we missed anyone, and I'll go off my notes as well to see if there's anyone else that I want to bring up. All right, let's see here. Yeah, if Zack Moss is available in your league, he's down here in my notes. It's relatively unlikely that he is, but if he's available, man, I do think that he's a good addition at this point. I was hesitant after this stat line, because if you were to wipe away those 2 touchdowns in week 2, it would have been a pretty bad stat line overall. But he showed up against Washington, man, and don't get me wrong, the Bills had everything in front of them, so they weren't really playing from behind. And but nonetheless, man, he's got Houston, Kansas City, and Tennessee, which are pretty good matchups coming up. So yeah, if Zack Moss is available and you're struggling at the running back position, I think it's a pretty good addition at this point in time, now that we've seen a larger sample size. If Emanuel Sanders is available in your league, he finally kind of had that breakout game, and once again, the Bills they're starting to get back to true form, putting up 35 points in week 2 and 43 points in week 3. Now they got Houston, Kansas City, and Tennessee, man. I like the addition of Emmanuel Sanders if he's available in your league, because this Bills team is starting to look how we expected them to look, right? Hunter Renfro is a guy who we talked about in previous waiver wire episodes, right? In full PPR, right, this is your most consistent player on the Raiders, right? Excuse me, but outside of full PPR, if he does not get in the end zone, right, he's relatively touchdown dependent in half PPR and in standard scoring formats. But in full PPR, if Hunter Renfro is available, he's the best receiver on the Raiders at this point in time. So I've got Christian Kirk put down. I don't think we need to go over him. If he's available, he's worth the addition, obviously. Tim Patrick, I don't think we need to go over him either, but if he's available, he's 100% worth the addition at this point in time. We've talked about Tim Patrick a lot on this channel, and he's worth the... he's definitely proven that he's worth being rostered at this point in time. And with that being said, KJ Hamler of the Denver Broncos tore his ACL or MCL, I can't remember off the top of my head, in Sunday's matchup. So that makes Tim Patrick even more valuable at this point in time. Okay, Deshawn Jackson. 3 receptions, 5 targets, 120 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Went absolutely ballistic against Tampa Bay. Did the Forrest Gump celebration, ran through the tunnel. Sean McVay met him in there. I'm very hesitant here on our guy Deshawn, man. I love to see it. I love to see a veteran balling out, man, but I'm still hesitant here. If you're really struggling at the receiver position in a deeper league, potentially worth an addition. He's got Arizona, Seattle, New York Giants, Detroit, and Houston. The Rams look like they can do it 100 different ways with a lot of different players. So I don't know how consistent he's going to be, although these matchups are really good. So I'm relatively, I'm hesitant on our guy Deshawn Jackson at the moment. LeBron's brain. So you just recommend starting Hines in full PPR this week. Shit, man. At this point in time, it's a really tough call, man. I think that in PPR, okay, so I think it was through the first 3 weeks in total, not each individual week. He had more points than Jonathan Taylor, if I'm remembering correctly. Through the first 3 weeks in total, he has more points overall. He's got Miami and he's got Baltimore, and it looks like the way he's being utilized, right? I mean, it's pretty close between the two. But in full PPR, yeah, I think he might be the better start. But it's kind of a gamble, right? Because either of these, now Jonathan Taylor hasn't scored a single touchdown. Yeah. Honestly, man, yeah, I would recommend starting Hines in full PPR going into week 4. I think he's the better back at this point in time. And he's just being utilized better overall. Cole Beasley, if he's still hanging out there on the waiver wire and you play full PPR, just go snatch this dude up, man. Come on. Let's show Cole some respect. Houston, Kansas City, Tennessee coming up. Like I said, get pieces of this Buffalo Bills offense on your roster, whether you're in a deep league or not, because they are back in freaking action, man. Let's talk about a player that I dropped in both of my leagues pretty early on. Really early on, just since last week, who, as soon as we drop him, actually puts up a good stat line, right? Marquez Callaway, 4 receptions off 5 targets, 41 receiving yards, and a touchdown. You wipe away the touchdown, it's not a great stat line. We still want to see this be more consistent, but I think he's worth monitoring and potentially worth a stash at this point in time. But like I said, you wipe away that touchdown, it's not the best stat line, so we want to see how he performs in the next coming weeks. But it's essentially worth the gamble, right? If he does turn out to be the #1 receiver for the Saints like we were anticipating, right? Kendrick Bourne had a score in yesterday's game, right? But while he put up a good stat line, I don't know how confident I would be in adding him. I mean, these are half PPR numbers, right? But nonetheless, still not very good stat lines in full PPR. And then in week 3, overall, a very good stat line, right? 96 receiving yards, 8 targets, 6 receptions, and a score. He's got Tampa Bay, Houston, Dallas, and the Jets coming up, so a lot of good matchups. But I would rather monitor this than go ahead and jump the gun. But someone's got to emerge, right? And we've seen it go back and forth between Myers, Aguilar, and Kendrick Bourne, and maybe that's just the way that it goes for the rest of the season, to where it's just a very frustrating receiving core to monitor, that of the New England Patriots. So AJ Green, the old veteran, man, finally had 2 consistent weeks, right? So he had a pretty good game, 112 receiving yards, right? 5 of 6 targets, right? Had a good stat line in week 2 with 44 receiving yards and a score. Bad matchups coming up, at least against the Rams. I guess the Niners not too bad of a matchup. Then he's got Cleveland, so it's kind of, these next 3 weeks are kind of sketchy. Then he's got Houston and Green Bay, which is like, Houston's a good matchup, but apparently it's not the worst matchup in the world. But if you're hurting at receiver in deeper leagues, I think you could consider AJ Green. But this Arizona Cardinals offense, they got a lot of pieces, right? Moore, who really disappointed us this past week. Christian Kirk, D-Hop, James Conner, AJ Green, Edmonds. I mean, I don't know who's going to get the ball. Max Williams. It's kind of like the Rams, right? They just have a lot of weapons, and some weeks these weapons are going to really flash, and other weeks they're not going to flash, right? LeBron's brain. If I'm the Colts this week, I'm wondering if our lack of production in the end zone is a result of Taylor or something else. And I would start Taylor this week in the end zone. It's literally 50-50. Yeah, it's a tough call, man. It truly, truly is. And that's kind of the thing is Jonathan Taylor's always going to have the chance to score. But through 3 weeks, he has not scored once. So I think Nyheim Hines might be a little bit of a safer value right now. But kind of pains me to tell you that you might want to bench Jonathan Taylor because I still believe in him on the season, man. Our guy Michael Carter, right? 9 rushes, 24 rushing yards overall. He's seen a little bit of an uptick in carries, right? Essentially looking like the primary back, although Ty Johnson is still taking, some carries away, right? Telvin Coleman was sidelined. I'm not sold on this backfield just yet. The next 2 weeks will be very telling. Tennessee and Atlanta. So I think if you want to take the risk, it's worth the addition. But I'm still pretty hesitant on this one, guys. I'm pretty hesitant on the New York Jets backfield overall. And that's coming from a guy who drafted Telvin Coleman, right? So, yeah, I don't feel great about this addition. But if you're desperate, I think these next 2 weeks could actually be pretty good for our guy Michael Carter. And it'll be a good testament, nonetheless, of if he's going to play a little bit better, being the quote-unquote lead back for the Jets. Okay, so Royce Freeman, some people have been kind of speculating, right? Because the Christian McCaffrey injury, could we see kind of a split backfield between that of Chuba Hubbard and Royce Freeman? It's possible, don't get me wrong. I mean, Freeman got a handoff within the 1 yard line and got stuffed in Thursday night's game, right? So he could have turned this into a decent stat line and made this more confusing, and we'll find out in the coming weeks. But for now, even in deeper leagues, I'm not feeling too great about Royce Freeman. If Henry Ruggs is available in your league, man, I've got him down on my notes. I mean, I own him in this league, but listen, he's getting the type of attraction. I mean, his ceiling is going to be high every week. I think a 20-point game is his ceiling every week. And I think his floor at this point is a little bit closer to 8 to 10 points. I like where he's at. He's being targeted pretty heavily by Carr. I mean, I think that Derek Carr is a big fan of Henry Ruggs, and I think the way that the Raiders are utilizing him shows pretty big confidence. So some tough matchups for the Raiders coming up. The Chargers, Chicago Bears are looking good defensively, looking very bad offensively. Then the Denver Broncos and Philadelphia Eagles. So they're going to have to fight in these games. And if Henry Ruggs is available, he's someone who I think you guys should definitely consider adding. Let's talk about the Houston Texans and Anthony Miller. Listen, this is a player who had a pretty good game in Thursday night, right? I mean, take away the touchdown, it's not a good game. So we want to monitor this situation. Tough matchups coming up, guys. Buffalo, New England, Indianapolis, Arizona, and the LA Rams. So this is one that I'm saying, I've got them down my notes, but overall, I would keep this as a monitored situation, right? Let's hop into a couple guys who might be available in your league due to IR status and injury status. All right, let's crack into it, man. Curtis Samuel. He might be out there. He might be available. He might still be stashed on a team like he is in this league, man. But Curtis Samuel of the Washington football team is eligible to come back this week from IR. He's been on the short-term IR. So if he's available, he might very well be worth an addition if you're desperate at receiver. I think he's going to have a pretty good season on the year when he is healthy. T.Y. Hilton is eligible to come back from IR. I mean, Zach Pascal and our guy Michael Pittman, although they played very poorly this past weekend, have looked pretty good without T.Y. Hilton. But we know what T.Y. can do. He might be worth a stash in deeper leagues, so we might want to monitor that a little bit. To see kind of how he comes back, being that he is a veteran player, but he's eligible to come back nonetheless. So Traquan Smith, I just typed in Smith, which there are a lot of Smiths in the world in general, but a lot of Smiths in the NFL as well. But nonetheless, here's Traquan Smith. He is eligible to come back from the IR, dealing with a hamstring injury, right? He is a proven receiver, and I think the Saints are going to bump him up to that number 1, number 2 spot. Right, I like where he is in terms of potentially stashing this player, I think he's going to see some pretty good work when he comes back from IR. Rashad Bateman, player who I drafted in this league and then dropped because I needed to get some impact players right away, is coming back or eligible to come back from IR this week. So yeah, he is a player worth stashing, right? I think he's going to make a pretty big difference for the Ravens. But nonetheless, with any of these players who are quote-unquote worth stashing, we want to get a sample size out of them before we really jump the gun. But if you have the roster room overall, it's worth considering, being that you can potentially jump the gun and get one of these players before anyone else does. So yeah, I like where Rashad Bateman is at. And I guess I don't like where he's at. He's been injured. But I like his chances of playing well when he comes back is the point I'm trying to make. So, yeah, man. I think I covered just about everyone that I wanted to, right? I mean, we know Chuba Hubbard is our top ad for the week. Peyton Barber, we want to see a larger sample size. Like I went over four tough matchups, I should say, in the coming weeks. So I don't know how likely another stat line like what we saw yesterday is. But I like him, like James Washington, Colin Johnson, Nick Westbrook. I mean, I think there's some good kind of diamonds in the rough. So let's go through the running backs. That's the one position I didn't really do a deep dive in, right? Mark Ingram didn't have a good game on Thursday night, didn't have a good week too. So got some tough matchups, Buffalo and New England. So I don't know how I'm feeling about Mark Ingram. Not feeling very confident there. Giovanni Bernard had a big game, right? He had a crazy touchdown. He got like freaking teeter-tottered into the air and looked like he died on the play, but 9 receptions off 10 targets. It looks like if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are playing from behind, that Giovanni Bernard has a better chance of getting involved, and they were certainly playing from behind here in Week 3 against the LA Rams. So, yeah, pretty hesitant on this one. In deeper leagues, 16-man plus leagues, I think he's worth a stash at this point. But you're gonna be taking a risk, right? Week 1 and Week 2, you see the stat line here, and then in Week 3, finally broke out and had a good game. But I would just be hesitant on adding Giovanni Bernard and what we're truly going to expect out of him. Our guy, Kyle Juszczyk, remember we went over the San Francisco 49ers backfield video that we did last week, and we talked about this, right? We might actually see Juszczyk get involved and have one of those weeks where he scores, but I didn't really advise going out and adding him because it's such a gamble. But I said the way that this backfield looks, we might actually see some more involvement from Juszczyk. And nonetheless, he did score. I mean, he's who gave the Niners the lead, right? At that point in the game, it was the lead. That game was all over the place, right? At the end of the game. So I don't know if we want to jump the gun still and add Kyle Juszczyk. But good performance overall. So that was nice to see. Carlos Hyde, I don't believe did anything whatsoever. I think that experiment is over with. If A.J. Dillon's hanging out there, I still don't think it's a good ad. But yeah, these running backs, man, they're thin. I mean, it should be noted that Alexander Madison had a very good game in place of Dalvin Cook. If Madison's available for some reason in your league, he's definitely worth the addition at this point in time. But running backs, man, this is why we draft them early and we draft a lot of them because they are so freaking thin. I can't think of anyone to add unless we're taking a gamble and adding Raheem Mostert to our IR spot for later on, right? But yeah, there's nobody. This is in a 12-man league. Nobody worth adding here, guys. So, yeah, I think that basically wraps it up. There was some buzz going around our guy Jake Funk getting some more involvement with Henderson not playing, but really Sony Michel, as it says here, 10 carries, 46 yards, was the guy for the Rams in the game. The Rams don't even need to run the football. They look so fucking good right now passing the ball that they truly don't even need to run the football at all. So Jacoby Myers, if he's hanging around, I think is another good player to consider at this point in time, right? But like I already went over when we talked about Kendrick Bourne, the New England Patriots as a whole, their receiving core, I think it's just going to be very frustrating all season long. So I'm not very confident in Myers at the moment. Bryan Edwards looks pretty consistent at this point in time, right? He had a touchdown called back in week 2 and a touchdown called back in week 1, or else I think we'd be really, really beating the barrel for adding Bryan Edwards, right? If you add a touchdown to this week 1 stat line, it's pretty damn good. If you add a touchdown to this week 2 stat line, it's pretty damn good, right? He still played well against Miami, right? 89 receiving yards, only off of 3 targets, right? I mean, these Raiders receivers are really kind of big play capability guys, and Henry Ruggs and Bryan Edwards, and even Hunter Renfro, who's really not really a big play type of guy. He's more of a consistent PPR value type of guy, but I kind of like where Bryan Edwards is at right now. I mean, a couple tough matchups for the Raiders, like we went over already, right? The Chargers, Chicago Bears, Denver Broncos, and the Philadelphia Eagles. But I've already got Henry Ruggs on this roster, but if I didn't, I would consider adding Bryan Edwards at this point in time. I think he's pretty much worth adding. We know that Darius Slayton got hurt, so he's not really worth adding at this point in time, as I don't think Braxton Berrios is either. Just looking for any other diamonds in the roughs that we could potentially go over before we wind down the stream. We are going to be doing a Monday Night Football stream tonight, so make sure you guys are tuning in for that a little bit later on in the night as well. But I'm going to be doing these Waiver Wire Mania Monday streams closer to 4 to 5 p.m. on Mondays, and then we'll hop back on a little bit later in the night for the Monday night stream and kind of general fantasy Q&A moving into week 4 as this week, for example, moving into week 4 with week 3 winding down. But, kind of on a weekly basis, we'll have the Monday night stream where we're winding down the current week and, kind of getting into the next week and get you guys this waiver wire content a little bit before then. But nonetheless, man, Khalif Raymond had a pretty good game from a full PPR standpoint. Really frustrating for all you guys who started Quentin Cephas, right? Do I think he's worth the addition? I don't know. I don't know what to think about this Lions offense. Probably not. But I hope he proves us wrong, right? I don't think Jeremy McNichols, he did have a score. He does this every year, right? I mean, they've got the Jets and the Jaguars, so they could get up ahead in those games and use McNichols a little bit more. But I'm still pretty hesitant. I mean, he is kind of the third down PPR value back, but Derrick Henry is Derrick Henry for a reason, so... maybe in deeper leagues, maybe in very, very deep weeks overall. Brian Pringle, never going to be consistent. Valdez-Scantling, who's another pretty inconsistent player. I mean, he had a touchdown, right? He had a good game against San Francisco, but once again, I just don't think the consistency is there for any receiver on the Green Bay Packers except for Devontae Adams and our guy Robert Tonyan, and I guess you could argue some Aaron Jones as well, right? Let's just make sure we're kind of going through everyone. Yeah, I mean, inconsistent are these Chiefs receivers, right? Unless your name is Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce. Terrace Marshall Jr. Could see an uptick with Christian McCaffrey being out. We talked about this a little bit earlier in the week, but we still want to see a larger sample size overall there. Gabriel Davis had a pretty good game. Oh, no, he did not. I don't know what I'm thinking. For some reason, I thought he scored. But I guess he did not, right? He's still looking pretty abysmal after that good week 1 performance. So we'll see if Davis can step it up, right? Zay Jones did nothing. He had a good week 1 and still hasn't done anything since then. So, I think that's basically going to wrap it up. I mean, every time we do these Waiver Wire Mania videos, I do just kind of like to make sure I'm going through every player we possibly could and giving you guys as many angles as possible. But I think we did a pretty good job today doing a pretty deep dive and going through all the players I had on my notes as well. So, man, we will be streaming again a little bit later tonight, man, and we will hop back on it a little bit later. So I appreciate all you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. As always, man, we do appreciate the Catch fam, man. We appreciate all the support that you guys show us. So if you guys are watching this retrospectively, go ahead and smash that like button. And if you're new to the channel, man, we are on the road to 200 subscribers here at the Catch. Go ahead and become a part of the Catch fam by subscribing down below. And with that, I thank you guys so much for watching or listening. Make sure you tune in for our Monday Night Football stream. Man, it is going to be a blast tonight. And with that, I will say, remember, you saw it here,